So yeah, Quentin Tarantino, his what 10th? This is 10th or 11th movie coming out. 10th, I
Tenth.
think. Uh, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, a lot of other really talented actors in it. Emile Hirsch,
Mm-hmm.
Margaret Qualley. Al Pacino
Oh,
having like a bit role.
right?
Yeah, Dakota Fanning. Lot of really good people in it. We're very excited to see that and to review that. And we thought, because we both really like Tarantino and think he's undeniably one of the greatest filmmakers of our generation or of our lifetime, we wanted to kind of run through his filmography, um, starting with Reservoir Dogs, obviously 1992. Um, it's interesting to think about Tarantino because I feel like when I think about him, I think about very specific times of him making movies. There's like that early Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, which is like the crime like wave for him, and then he moves into this more like I don't know, spaghetti western,
Mm-hmm.
Asian film influenced, Kill Bill through what Bastards or Django type thing.
That's about right. Yeah.
Even ending with Hateful Eight, this is like a weird run for him. Um, and now he's moving into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I'm not sure if this is going to be like a move into a next phase of his career or not. I was surprised he's only 56. I kind of expect him to be older.
Yeah, he obviously Reservoir Dogs came out in '92, and his peers, his generation of filmmakers, like the post like New Hollywood run, it's all guys or men and women in their late 50s, early 60s at this point. So your
Mhm.
Paul Thomas Andersons, your David Finchers, your David O. Russells, Alexander Paynes, as well as the guys who were making foreign films at the time, like Poirot and Del Toro, Inarritu. It's really quite the crop, and even like maybe less heralded people like Alexander Payne and Cameron Crowe. And Wes Anderson, of course, too, come at the end.
Mhm.
It's a really impressive group of filmmakers. So, and Spike Jonze, we mentioned last week, when he does make movies, is also in this group. And there's a lot of them have really singular filmmaking identities, especially like a Fincher and a PTA. And
Mhm.
I think you can talk for hours about if Tarantino is better than Paul Thomas Anderson or whose films you like more. It's kind of a dumb thing to talk about because they all make so many different types of film. But Tarantino has always stood out for his uh, unique uh, writing style in terms of how he
Mhm.
tells his stories, how he frames his narratives, and it also factors into how edgy he is in terms of the themes. He's obviously been quite the controversial filmmaker, and that also goes along with the fact that he's a bit of an odd guy, to,
Yeah.
to put it bluntly. And sometimes it's harmless things, sometimes it's more problematic stuff. We can get to that as
Mhm.
it comes up, but his filmmaking legacy is obviously undeniable, and there's tons of scholarship about Tarantino. We just wanted to kind of go through everything and get it on record because I mean, Hateful Eight came out before we started this pod, so we really haven't talked about Tarantino at great length, really at all on the pod yet. So exciting to talk about him now.
Yeah. Why don't we start with Reservoir Dogs? 1992, starring Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Chris Penn, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Tierney, Mark Madsen, and Tarantino himself is in there.
Michael Madsen.
Uh, Michael Madsen, sorry. I mean, this was the first Tarantino movie I ever saw,
Really
and
interesting.
it, and I mean, it's funny because when I think about when I saw it, I think I was in high school, and um, it really just drew me in for the aesthetic it brought. It's these guys, they're walking in the same suits, they're walking next to each other. It's like this very stylized looking thing, and it's interesting because it's so sectionalized into the before and after of the film. It centers around this heist that goes wrong, and it's the lead up to the heist, and Tim Roth working as this undercover agent who's infiltrated this group, and then the post heist and figuring out like who gave them away, who tipped off the cops, and um, I'm much more drawn to that second part, the like almost like a bottle episode of being stuck in this warehouse and like them interrogating each other and trying to figure it out. There's obviously the very famous scene of Michael Madsen torturing the guy that he takes from the bank, the cop. So uh, just a lot to like about this movie. How do you feel about Reservoir Dogs?
Come to think of it, I'm really not sure what the first Tarantino movie I've seen. Maybe it's Kill Bill. I'm not really sure.
Mm.
Um, but either way, he's a guy who made a lot of movies before we were uh, had fully formed adult brains to enough to appreciate the movie.
Right.
So uh, I've actually enjoyed rewatching some of them more recently because I remember I watched some of these when I was a teenager or in college.
Hmm.
I just didn't quite fully appreciate what Tarantino does, but Reservoir Dogs, as you kind of mentioned, is really just it's really all dialogue. There aren't like set pieces. There's the brief chase when you watch Mr. Pink Buscemi like
Hmm.
run away, and there are some gunshots and there's a brief car chase moment, but it's really all about the dialogue in that warehouse and how the web everyone's weaving with their words and
Hmm.
uh, the nonlinearity of it all, which he has done in several other movies, is just kind of really, I think, really effective because again, you don't see any of the heist on its face. That's a really bold thing, especially for your debut movie.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's what stands up and like holds up the best about this movie is that you have this world class group of actors, which is the case for all of his movies, really. But the fact that the script is so tight, and Tarantino is the sole writer of all of his screenplays, and
Hmm.
that script, I think, it drives the movie. It's the only thing there to drive the movie and inform the performances. And it's funny, he actually funded the making of this movie, which again is a super cheap movie, like made it for under $2 million, but on the sale of his True Romance script.
Yep.
So, and it's kind of heralded, I guess, as like the start of a new wave for independent film, and he kind of kept that going because this movie was made with Miramax,
Yep.
and Tarantino's relationship with Harvey Weinstein is prolific from a filmmaking
Hmm.
perspective, but also is not without its issues. But yeah, this is the start of that.
Yeah.
Too.
You know what? When I think of Reservoir Dogs, I think about all those little glimpses of when you really start to get a sense of Tarantino's style. And you talked about the dialogue and how that's like the real driver of the movie. And you think about like whether it's Tim Roth on top of the building with his cop partner, kind of running the lines, making sure that he knows his whole backstory, he understands all the steps. But you have that like awesome background of like I'm pretty sure they're in LA, and just like the whole like city behind them. Or you think about during that Michael Madsen torture scene when he like walks out to his car to get the gasoline, and like you have Stuck in the Middle with You playing, and like just like the music choices, the way that it's this tracking shot behind him as he walks out, how slow and deliberate it is, but you're like hanging on the edge of your seat with all of it. And it's Tarantino has this amazing way of taking these things that I think other filmmakers could make seem not as interesting. And he just adds these little flourishes to it, whether it's the music cutting out as you walk outside of the warehouse and then coming back in when you open the door, things like that. His little flourishes, little touches, you can start to see that in this. And I think obviously he really perfects that with Pulp Fiction. We'll talk about that in a minute, but just really cool to see this as his first movie, and obviously the potential there is undeniable. Any last thoughts about Reservoir Dogs?
It's also the first movie, his first movie, but the first time Tarantino cameos in his own film.
Yeah.
And of course, he dies off screen in this, but you know, I think his first, or really his only big chunk of dialogue is where he's describing it's like the like a virgin scene.
Yep.
Um, very very Tarantino. I'm sure plenty of people are not happy with that one, but it's on brand from the start.
Yeah, he's really eccentric. And he also is in Pulp Fiction, playing or
Yes,
not himself, but
the
playing
friend.
a friend of Jules, and that's quite a funny scene as well. So yeah, Pulp Fiction, 1994, starring John Travolta, Samuel L. Jackson, Uma Thurman, Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Bruce Willis, Ving Rhames.
Mm.
I mean, the Rosanna Arquette, ton of
Yeah.
people in this. And I don't know how to really describe the plot. Just it follows these different stories around these different crimes happening in LA, and kind of the escapades around that, I guess, so to speak. Um, Tarantino received a Best Director nomination for this, Best Original Screenplay, which he won for this, his first Academy Award. This was his true breakout movie. Reservoir Dogs was a solid start, but this is where he kind of propelled his career into another stratosphere. And I actually rewatched this prior to the podcast, and what I just found amazing is how this is a 2 hour, 34-minute movie, and it really felt like I was watching it for maybe like an hour. Like it didn't feel slow at all. Even scenes where there didn't seem to be much happening. There's just so much subcontext and everything that's going on. It's just really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I think another nonlinear story, but
Hmm.
kind of on steroids because there's like these 7 distinct parts to the movie, and I think the fourth part is kind of told in two of its own segments. But I mean, Pulp Fiction again, is really a classic film, usually heralded as the best Tarantino movie. Certainly the most influential, most important movie he ever made. Um, Another independent, beacon for that kind of filmmaking. And what stands out to me, of course, is the obvious stuff. Is because the unlimited storytelling, you kill off Vega,
Hmm.
and then you bring him back through the
Yep.
virtues of your time
Timelines.
headcanon, and it was just genius.
Yep.
Way to go! And the whole framing of how Vince Vega's in the bathroom the whole time and living, and then Samuel Jackson's Crisis of Faith, Jules' Crisis of Faith,
Yep.
with getting lucky and stuff. It's just framed so well. Meanwhile, you have so many iconic dialogue moments, like
Oh my god.
"Say what again" in the very
Hmm.
beginning. Not
That
to mention,
whole like scene with Jules where he recites the Bible verse and
Mhm.
all that shit, just iconic. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, of course, and stuff that's even just more funny, like the whole Gimp scene where Ving Rhames is sexually assaulted after
Hmm.
being kidnapped in that store. Um, and then Uma Thurman, who got a Best Supporting Actress nomination from this movie, was just an immediate icon character of the '90s of modern filmmaking. It's just there's so much here. I mean, this won the Palme d'Or too, so it
Hmm.
really kicked off QT's career and Weinstein's success from the get go. Honestly, it made Miramax the powerhouse that it was for almost a decade.
Yeah, thinking about how he balances these moments of tenseness with just like hilarity. y- You think about when Bruce Willis goes back to get his father's watch, which the whole scene uh, where the dad's war buddy, played by uh, Christopher Walken, is
Oh yeah,
like telling how they got the watch to him. It's just like so ridiculous on so many levels. But then he goes back, and you're kind of like, oh shit, like who's gonna be waiting for him in here? Like who's gonna get him? And then you don't really see anybody until, like you said, Vince like walks out of the bathroom and he just lights him up, and then the toaster's going off. The whole thing is just like hilarious. And then even the he takes something like you said where Ving Rhames is sexually assaulted, but then right afterwards you get some of the most iconic dialogue from him where he goes, "You hear that, motherfucker? We're about to go medieval on your ass." Like just iconic stuff, like just crazy. Or when they're driving Marvin to wherever and Vega shoots him in the face by accident, and the
they hit
whole
a bump, man. They hit a motherfucking bump.
the whole thing right after. Even ending with the jewels in the diner scene at the
Yep.
end. It's the one that says "bad
Great.
motherfucker" on it. Just incredible. So, um, Pulp Fiction really propels him to this point where he can start to make any projects he wants to, and that kind of leads into Jackie Brown, which received mixed um, reviews. I think the critique of Jackie Brown a lot of times is it's a long movie that feels long at times, and that's a bit it's a bit hit and miss for Tarantino in his filmography. Because I looking through the movies here, it's just like something like Kill Bill and Inglorious Basterds. Those are long movies that don't feel as long, but then
Mhm.
something like Hateful Eight, it's like, man, that movie felt 4 hours at points.
Right. And the thing with Pulp Fiction was made for 8 million bucks and made 213 worldwide, and then Jackie Brown 3 years later cost 12 million bucks, just as cheap, but only grossed 39 million domestic and
Hmm.
wasn't even like had a foreign release at all.
Yeah.
And I think your stance on Jackie Brown really kind of depends on your familiarity with Quentin Tarantino's movies, because I think a lot of people just kind of write off the movie if they've even seen it.
Mhm.
Um, and there's also a lot of like, film heads, cinephile people that like really ride for Jackie Brown as like top tier Tarantino. I think it's definitely perhaps at the top of the list for Tarantino movies that you appreciate more on a second viewing once you understand what you're watching and how it's working. Because I think the movie is still quite successful and it's a good movie. And the way Samuel Jackson is characterized is great. And you have Robert De Niro playing very off type at the
Yep.
time. Um, in good role as well. And of course, Pam Grier really carries the movie. But it was one as well that I took a while to come around on. And in fact, it was also one of the last Quentin Tarantino movies I actually saw. So I'm actually just really curious, like, what do you think the viewership on this is? Because I have the feeling like this one was just not running on cable as much as his other movies.
Oh, that I can't imagine this is a very cable movie, especially because some of the backlash after this was around the use of the N word and racial epithets throughout. I think they say the N word close to 40 times in this movie,
Mm,
and famously Spike Lee came out and talked about how he took issue with Tarantino's use of the N word in his movies and feeling like he's almost like obsessed with that and using that word in some way. Tarantino famously came back and said, I feel like when you give one word that much power, you should just say it all the time because no word should have that much power. And depending on where you fall on it, I guess you can
right.
make your own decisions, but certainly controversial in some senses. And this is, you know, it's interesting to think about Jackie Brown because you think about this came out in 1997. It revives Pam Grier and Robert Forster's career, but you have Samuel L. Jackson, who's a rising star, Michael Keaton, who's an established star, Robert De Niro, who's already an established star. It's got a stacked cast, and to only gross 39 million, um, it feels like a
Especially at that time
failure,
too. Yeah.
right? But in a sense, I mean, this pays a lot of homage to like 1970s black exploitation movies, which
Right.
Pam Grier starred in, and I think this really starts to show Tarantino dipping into some of his more unique and textured influences. Which you'll start to see, especially with like the spaghetti westerns that he'll start to really
Right.
move into.
Yeah, Robert Forster actually was nominated for his
Yeah.
role at the Oscars too. But yeah, I mean, Samuel L. Jackson, who's been in 6 Tarantino movies, obviously his most frequent collaborator, and he was also in True Romance. Um,
Mhm.
he has defended Tarantino's use of the N word in his films, and I think in the case of Jackie Brown, because it's a very obvious homage to black exploitation movies, it contextually it does feel like it fits, and I believe that was SLJ's point of view on the
Mhm.
matter. Um, but you know, this will come up again in more of his movies. But it's kind of interesting that you know his first 2 movies, Reservoir Dogs, especially Pulp Fiction, were very controversial in the mainstream just for fetishizing violence.
Yep.
He was accused of glorifying heroin use in Pulp Fiction,
Hmm.
which I think is pretty fucking ludicrous. But it was said that by Bobby
Yeah,
Goldberg of all people.
yeah, considering someone the character pretty much dies and is brought back to life.
Yeah, yeah.
Not
Definitely
not
want to do it.
yeah,
Thank
not
you.
not definitely glorified in my eyes, but hey, whatever.
Um, yeah, and then it has a 6-year break, man, between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill Volume 1. And of course, he has a lot of scripts. I mean, soon after this, he's working on the Bastards script.
Hmm.
So he was always a very active guy.
Yeah.
Natural Born Killers, he had a story credit on, which came out around this time as well. Uh, but yeah, I mean, getting to Kill Bill after Jackie Brown, which was definitely considered a flop for QT. You have Kill Bill Volume 1 come out, and that's quite the comeback. It makes 4 times as much money.
Yeah, it's Kill Bill is really funny to me. At least just the concept of it. And this is where you start to see a lot of the through lines of this Tarantino universe, where it's definitely connected in ways. So you think back to Uma Thurman's character in Pulp Fiction, and while she's sitting in the diner with Vega, she talks about this role she played on TV where there's these 4 assassins and each one is this different type. And
It's
when you
sick.
Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, basically, she's describing Kill Bill, and then she's playing the character she would have been in that TV show. It's fucking fascinating.
He just doesn't make a big deal out about it. But
Right.
nowadays, I mean, you can never do it this way. It's kind
No.
of cool.
And I mean, even thinking about like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, it's like Vega and Jules wear the same suits that the Reservoir Dogs guys wear. So
Mhm.
there's even the idea that maybe there's some connection there. And there's other ones that we'll talk about as we go through. But Kill Bill was originally pitched as a 4-hour movie. Tarantino wanted to put both one and two together and
Mhm.
just put it out there. And
It was one production. He made them all. Made it all at once.
and it feels that way. If you watch them back to back, you can tell it was all made at once. It's very singular, but it's just funny to me that he just wanted to like put it out there that way, and the studio had to be like, "No, you're not putting a 4-hour movie out. No one's buying tickets." To
I
that,
mean, Harvey knew his stuff from
yeah.
the filmmaking side, obviously.
um, but obviously starring Uma Thurman, Lucy Liu, Vivica A. Fox, uh, Michael Madsen, Daryl Hannah, David Carradine, Gordon Liu. Uh, this is like, you know, his real kung fu martial arts movie. His real ode to the Asian films that he really liked growing up. Uh, this team of assassins is taken out by the bride, who is seeking revenge after this team led by who's under Bill tries to kill her and her unborn child.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, the movie. When I think about Kill Bill, it starts off where it has this like awesome opening, and then she's kind of stuck in the hospital there, and she's in a coma and being sexually assaulted in there, and then you slowly
Mhm.
see her like start to rise, and like the way that she like breaks out of that, it's like this escape scene, and then it moves on to her just like tracking down each one and having these like individual fight scenes with them that are also memorable in such different ways. Like the Vivica A. Fox one is this inside this house, and while her kids are home, she's like having this
Knife
fight and then
break.
like stopping and starting. It's awesome. And then you think about the one with Lucy Liu, and it's like this incredibly grand one where she kills like what, like 200 people or
The
something like
the
that.
Crazy 88s. Yeah,
Yeah.
blood splattering, goes to black and white,
Mhm.
quick cuts. Yeah,
Doesn't even go to animation at one point too.
yeah, I think it does, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just I don't the movie doesn't abruptly end, it almost ends at the perfect endpoint given
Hmm.
the 4-hour runtime we were given here. Uh, but yeah, it's funny because Kill Bill I was talking about them in tandem, they come out a year apart. Um,
Hmm.
and Volume 1 just has tons of violence. You mentioned all the one-on-one duels and, of course, the Lucy Liu, Gordon Liu fight. Um, Tons of people die, as you said. And then in
Yep.
Kill Bill Volume 2, there's really not much death at all, um, especially at the hand of Beatrice. She's not really killing that many people. And I think just the way the movies starkly change is uh is really interesting. I think overall it's a fucking awesome overall story the way it's told. Again, another non-linear thing from QT, but I think I find Volume 1 more fun to revisit just because I
Yeah.
think some of those scenes are just fun to watch on their own, pull apart. Obviously, the Crazy 88 scene, just a ridiculous set piece. It's awesome.
Yep.
But the beats with Bill at the end of Volume 2, I don't think they hit as hard unless you've
Nah.
just watched the rest of it.
Hmm.
So I think it just kind of depends what you're looking for. But I really ride for Volume 1. It's definitely one of my favorites. And yeah, I just think there's just so many cool things you can just kind of jump in and appreciate. And I mean, Uma Thurman, it crushes it. But what I will say about Volume 2, that I always have a hard time ranking it because of my love of everything with Pai Mei when she goes to the train, which is just a
Yep.
flashback in her head. And even though he does have some misogynistic marks, I mean, when he's like, "Bitch, do you speak Cantonese? You dumbass? No, you don't." Like he's just such an asshole. It's awesome. And then
Yeah.
the whole thing where they fight and he just clowns her ass. It's great.
Mhm.
Um, and we have a scene from that in our channel trailer on youtube.com/nostalgia pod. So check that out. But yeah, Volume 1 is probably my go-to of these 2, obviously.
Not
But it is
totally.
also important to note that another controversy came out of from Tarantino with this because
Hmm.
of uh, forcing, pressuring Uma Thurman into doing her own stunts in a
Yep.
unsafe car on a outdoor track, and she really fucked up her knee and her neck, I believe
Mhm.
is how it went, and she was not happy with how this went, despite and she felt she was just pressured into doing something unsafe. And it does seem like they've kind of mended the bridge since then. Maya Hawke, Uma's daughter, is has a
Mhm.
small role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but another strike on his judgment scale. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he in almost every aspect, I think, embodies the idea of like creative genius. But I think that then pushes him for perfection with some of these things, and to the point where I think he doesn't want to cut corners, doesn't want things to feel inauthentic if he can help it, and that sometimes leads him to not always have the soundest judgment in terms of safety or maybe how things will be perceived. But I agree with what you were saying about Kill Bill Volume One over Volume Two. Definitely, just more fun to watch. If we had to do a rewatchables, I would definitely say Volume One, Kill Bill. Just so awesome. Uh, why don't we move on to Death Proof, 2007? Kurt Russell, Rosario Dawson, Rose McGowan, Sidney Poitier, and also Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah,
Uh,
young one.
Yeah, young in this. Kurt Russell plays a murderous stuntman who murders young women in staged car accidents. This is actually a movie I haven't seen. I thought I'd seen every Tarantino movie. I was looking at his filmography. I was like, Death Proof, huh? And it was released as part of this double feature with Robert Rodriguez's Planet Terror. It was called Grindhouse,
Yep.
as a ode to old Grindhouse flicks. So um, I can't really talk too much about the quality of it, but I do like the concept and Tarantino just continuing to be his weird self and having these homages to these like very niche like film I don't know, film traditions in a sense. He really rides for these things that fall in
Mhm.
and out of style.
Right, and some of his hardest critics will say that Tarantino doesn't actually bring much to the table. He watched a lot of movies and he just copied other people's stuff, which I think is a gross simplification that can easily be
Yeah.
refuted. But if he does have a simple movie, it's probably Death Proof. You just gave the plot synopsis. That is effectively all there is there, and it just kind of it's a poetic justice type ending. Uh, Simple metaphor. I don't know. It's my least favorite of his. It was the only QT movie I watched, and I was just like, I looked at the person next to me, and I was like, yeah, that was good. It's not offensive or anything, but coming off Kill Bill, coming off his '90s run, it's a bit disappointing. And at the time, this was his most expensive movie to date, 67 million. Yet it only grossed 25 million here in the states and like less than 500K worldwide. So a bit of a flop, and like even more so than Jackie Brown, it's just something that people just don't know he made. I mean, to your point,
Mhm.
you didn't even really know about it. And I like lots of parts of. I mean, there's a lot of car stuff. Obviously, as the synopsis suggests, a lot of that looks great and is done cool. And Kurt Russell, I think, is good in the movie. So is Rosario. Rose McGowan's really good in a
Mhm.
smaller role as well. But yeah, I think it's a little simpler, and like it's
Mhm.
cool, like it's a cool idea, but it's not as grand or as special. It's not special at all, really, as some of his other stuff. And this was his first one since Miramax like folded. It was under Dimension Films, which was just another Weinstein film. The rest of his movies were under the Weinstein Company, but it was
Mhm.
still with Harvey and stuff. But yeah, the double feature bill of it all is pretty interesting. And he had worked with Robert Rodriguez before, of course. He was a partial director on Sin City um, in '05. But
Mhm.
yeah, if he has a miss on the resume, it's definitely this one.
Yeah. You want to move on to Inglorious Bastards?
Boy, do I.
All right. Oblige him. Uh, 2009. Brad Pitt, Christoph Waltz, Michael Fassbender, uh, a couple others, Eli Roth, Diane Kruger, Melanie Laurent. It's funny, rewatching Pulp Fiction recently, I noticed that when Brad Pitt or not Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis hits Ving Rhames, and they get out of the car. Ving Rhames is talking with Kathy Griffin as one of the bystanders, and I feel like that was one of the first times I can remember like him having these like random people show up to make these cameos, like Channing Tatum and Hateful Eight. Um, but Inglorious Bastards with Mike Myers.
Yeah.
Just like I feel like that was the first time I was like, oh, he really has like the most random people just show up in these things.
Daniel Bruhl has a good role in
Yeah,
this as well.
yep. But man, Inglorious Bastards probably. I mean, this is definitely top three Tarantino for me. It follows these two separate plots to kill Adolf Hitler and Nazi leadership at the end of World War II. One by Shoshana, and one by Aldo's uh,
Bastards.
Bastards. Where do you fall with Inglorious Bastards? You a fan?
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think I have this 3 or 4 on my rankings. Um, just because it's our introduction to Christoph Waltz in terms of
Yeah.
Hollywood roles, and it's such a memorable introduction because it's literally the beginning of the movie at
Mm-hmm.
that farmhouse scene, which is really immaculately paced movie, right after the title card stuff, classic Tarantino opening. And then you just have this uh, nausea inducing intensity as was Landa just
Mm-hmm.
kind of breaks down this farmer, right,
Yeah.
for harboring the Jews in his floorboards. And
Yeah.
while Christoph Waltz is someone who, as we've grown more familiar with his performances, and we get it soon again with Django, um, it's more it's probably not as new or as fresh as it once was. It was just such an amazing coming out party that he just immediately took over the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and of course he won the Oscar
Yep.
for this role, best supporting, and that's something that like really stands out and holds up today. But then on the other hand, you have something that he's not in at all. The that tavern scene, that bar scene,
Yeah.
where Fassbender has his brief moments, and yet again, it's just incredible stuff. So even I know some people, like some critics, think the movie is like really messy, and while Waltz was great, it just was kind of jumbled. But it's really just a bunch of set pieces, and I feel like almost all of these set pieces are so dynamite
Oh
that
my god.
I don't understand how you can be too critical of it.
Yeah, and they're so dynamite in different ways. You talk about that opening scene where it's Walt just like methodically and slowly tearing this guy apart at the
Mhm.
seams, and he switches over to English and he's like, "You're hiding the Jews in your floorboards, aren't you?" And the guy just is like, yes. But then like you talk about like the bar scene and Fassbender and everything going on there, how the multiple spies are like all working on these different levels, and Fassbender is just absolutely electric in that scene, dude. Like when he finally says like, well, old chap, if this is it, I hope you don't mind if I go out speaking to kings. Like that line is just like, whew, like that is pure movie making right there. And then you think about them in the theater at the end, and you have the bastards kind of sneaking in there, and that's probably one of the funniest like Tarantino scenes just in general, with like Brad Pitt and his crew having to fake being what French and
Italian, right?
Italian. Gorlami. Like just the way that they keep saying like their names is so ridiculous. Um, and then it ends with this really creepy uh, film, or that shown of Shoshana burning down the Nazis, and the way that that's shot, and the way that like the terror in that scene kind of comes about out. It's just so perfect. You
Mhm.
know, I would probably put this one or two, maybe even three, thinking about it. But I think this is probably when he was at the height of his powers. I mean, um, this is this is the most money that he had ever made in a movie, and then Django obviously will top that just 3 years later. But I think this really pushes him into that stratosphere of like, this is a legendary filmmaker. Kill Bill got a lot of love, but then, like you said, he had Death Proof. So there was like a 5-year layoff between Kill Bill and Inglorious Bastards. And I think this is when he reestablishes himself as like a
Right.
modern genius.
15 years after Pulp Fiction. crazy
Crazy.
enough.
Um, any other
Yeah,
thoughts on this?
yeah, it's also really cathartic to watch Goebbels and Hitler get fucked up in a alternate reality after all. And as you mentioned, there are just some really memorable side characters like the Bear Jew, of course, Eli Roth, and yeah,
Oh yeah, Teddy fucking ball game.
Family Pack.
Ran the lands down the street. Like you mentioned though, yeah, there's catharsis in watching Goebbels and Hitler kind of get their comeuppance, but that actually drew some controversy in terms of people saying, does Tarantino, not a Jewish American, have the right to like make a film like this
Yeah,
or tell this story?
right. And I get that sentiment, but part of that was like it's Holocaust erasure, or you're making the Jews like the Nazis. I don't think anyone with a brain really takes that away.
No.
Like it's not a pro-Nazi film at all, and it's if anything, it's embodying the anger of
Hmm.
the Jewish people, if anything. And
No,
yes,
certainly.
Quentin Tarantino does not have roots from the Holocaust personally, but does feel like he's capturing the sentiment to
Hmm.
me. And I'm not Jewish, so I guess don't matter what I think either. But
Right.
uh, yeah, I don't know. It's funny because you check Rotten Tomatoes and you wouldn't understand that there actually was a lot of critical up and down this. It's funny because I mentioned some people just think the movie is structurally just off, and other people just have these really hard top level thematic problems, as you said. So
Hmm.
another one that I think has aged well, and I think a lot of those concerns have faded away. You just don't hear them talked about that much. I mean, in terms of the problems with Tarantino's movies, this is towards the bottom of the list for most people. I feel like the N word stuff definitely will come up first, and even his treatment of female characters probably as well. Um, yeah, but another talking point that accompanies his movie, which is on brand at this point.
And then Django, 2012. Django, Django. Um, Jamie Foxx, Christoph Waltz again, Leonardo DiCaprio, Samuel L. Jackson, Kerry Washington, Walton Goggins,
Jonah Hill,
Jonah Hill. Yeah, another one of those cameos that's just like,
fantastic.
yeah, shows up and kind of steals the scene he's in.
Who
Tells a
fucking
story.
made these hoods?
Yeah. Listen, we're all grateful to your wife for making the hoods, okay?
We
Just
can all agree that it could have been done better next time. Fantastic
um,
cameo.
so good. This follows the story of Dr. King Schultz, a bounty hunter, goes out kidnapping outlaws, bringing them in to get the reward. He buys Django, or I guess takes Django to help him find some outlaws, and then feels compelled to help Django find his wife, who he's been separated from, and which leads him to the plantation of Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Um, this was in college probably my favorite movie. Uh, we watched this dozens of times my junior and senior year. Just really really wonderful. Uh, I when I think about Django and what I think really stands out to me is it feels very much um like a Tarantino movie, but almost like modernized in a sense. It's telling this like this Civil War era movie or tale, but he infuses it with like Rick Ross songs and
That's right.
really, even though it's
100
it's
black coffins for 100
yeah,
dead men.
and even though it's like this very like spaghetti western type, it doesn't feel old or aged anyway. It's just is really crisp and there's not really I don't really have too much bad to say about it. Where are you at with Django?
Yeah, it's the first one I bought on Blu-ray. I had all the other ones on DVD at this point. Up to this point, uh, yeah, I think it's a movie that because it's so pulpy, it's just really easy to jump in on a lot of these scenes and have a good time because Waltz and Fox, for the most part, are having a good time. Another movie that got some criticism from Spike Lee and people in general, just because it's really I don't say fetishizing slavery, but it's making it seem like it wasn't as tough at times. I think just because the overall air and attitude of the movie is more upbeat. I mean, watching this movie doesn't make you feel like slavery was easy or anything. I think that's also a pretty dumb thing to say.
Mhm.
Um, but some people had a problem with, that. And again, there's a lot of N words in this, but
Mhm.
contextually, um, we're talking about slave owning people using slurs. It's not that far of a walk in my book, even if it's not fun to watch and hear.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, Walt. I remember rooting against Waltz for the Oscar. I forget exactly who I was running for, but he won. He wins again for supporting, which is really just another twist on what he did for Landa. But and I think some people were like, "Oh yeah, nominate the white guy again." Fox didn't even get nominated at all. Yada yada. But it's it was really a blockbuster for him, making 262 million here in the states, and for R-rated adult movie, that's becoming rarer and rarer by the month these days. But yeah, I think Django is, it doesn't do anything super memorable the way stuff like Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs or Bastards does. So I think critically, it's hard to keep this at the top of a list because those other movies really go above and beyond or influence things in special ways. But just a pure enjoyment factor, it's right up there. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it still has held up quite fondly.
Y Yeah, and that final shootout scene is right up there with the final scene of Kill Bill Volume 1 in terms of just absolute gore and,
Right.
uh, just to, go back to it, Christoph Waltz was up against, Alan Arkin in Argo, De Niro in Silver Linings Playbook, Philip Seymour Hoffman from The Master, and Tommy
That's
Lee
it.
Jones for Lincoln. Yeah, and I think Hoffman, probably looking back, the deserved to win, but Waltz is spectacular in this. That scene where Calvin Candy's making him shake his hand and he shoots him. And he's like, I couldn't resist, and then just gets blown away. Is like, awesome scene. Yeah, Django, it's up there for me. We'll probably do a quick recap of our favorites at the end, but just for time's sake, why don't we move on to Hateful Eight? You know, this is his most recent movie, and probably after, well, I haven't seen Death Proof, so probably my least favorite Tarantino. Still very good in my opinion. Has Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, Jennifer Jason Lee, Walton Goggins, Tim
Bruce
Roth.
Dern.
Yep, Bruce Dern, Michael Madsen. Really solid cast.
Don't
These,
forget Channing Tatum. Got so
yeah.
many chains they call me Channing Tatum.
Eight strangers kind of are holed up in this stagecoach stopover somewhere in post Civil War Northwest, it seems
Mhm.
like, and kind of the story about them. What I don't even know how to describe it. Just like not trusting each other,
Yeah.
not getting along.
Yeah,
I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I really liked Hateful Eight, uh, coming out of it. I still think of it pretty warmly. I know it's definitely more of a mixed, reception, and it grows far less than
Mhm.
Django. Uh, but I think the foreplay, the setup of it all, it's kind of classic old school Tarantino because it's really all dialogue. It's just these people uh, talking around circles around each other slash openly shit talking each other in this cabin,
Yeah.
and that's just pure script and pure acting, and that reminds me of Reservoir Dogs and stuff like that.
Well,
Is
yeah.
it is it a little long in the tooth? Probably. I really wish I could have seen it on a 70 millimeter,
Mhm.
um, just because everyone said that was fantastic. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is getting that release in like New York and LA and at like Alamo Draft House Theater. So I would love to see how he shot it, considering QT is someone to use lots of like real film in his
Mhm.
filmmaking. But yeah, I think Hateful Eight, it's kind of being like lost to time a little bit. Like it's been on Netflix for a while, but not a lot of people ride for it the same way they even ride for a less heralded film like Jackie Brown. So
Mhm.
I think it's just like solid Tarantino. It doesn't do anything he hasn't done before. It's a lot of the actors you've seen him use before. It's none of their best movies of
Mhm.
his. So In a sense,
except
it's
for one.
unremarkable, but I still thought it was a great time.
I would say Jennifer Jason Leigh is like fantastic in this.
Oscar
Um,
nominated.
Yep, and she totally deserved it. I think that this does something really well that maybe we haven't touched on enough, but Tarantino is able to build out characters so quickly, and in these little ways help you understand who the character is. Whether it's Samuel L. Jackson in this movie, where his character has the fake Lincoln letter as a way of like
Right.
getting people to like get off his back, um, or even thinking back to something like Jackie Brown, how like you have the scene where Lewis and I forgot what her name is, Ordell's white girlfriend are in the house, and then they have sex really quickly and they just go back to like smoking pot, and you kind of get the sense of like they're these like just total like druggies, but also these like weird, like huge. I don't even know how to describe it, but it really just gives you a sense of who they are, just the way that that whole scene goes down. Um, or even again that movie, like Michael Keaton, the way he like eats food in that movie is so like specific to like the character he is. He has these really, he's so focused on the details of things. He really builds out characters well and makes these really really interesting characters. And I think that's out of everything, the strength of Hateful Eight is everybody in that stopover is really fleshed out really well and interesting, even if the movie itself isn't um, the most captivating Tarantino. It's released on Netflix as a 4-part mini series, basically.
Yeah, I think that was done after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's kind of funny to think of Hateful Eight and Jackie Brown in tandem as you just did, but it's the miniseries. I know I haven't watched it that way. I like to rewatch it. I don't think I've seen it since I saw it in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'd be curious to see how the runtime lasts when the beats are familiar. But it, yeah, yeah, it's one I feel like I'm defending more because I want to defend it, even though I don't have any like great reasons for.
Yeah,
I feel like it just kind of needs to be at the bottom of a list or towards the bottom,
yeah.
being objective.
You know, as we're wrapping up, one thing we didn't, I don't know if we mentioned, but I just wanted to highlight again. Tarantino, other than Jackie Brown, writes all these stories,
Mhm.
and in an age where the same time we're reviewing his new movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we're going to be talking about a Lion King remake. I think there's something to be said for having these original stories and being able to come up with something that other people aren't. So tons of credit to him, and obviously if you haven't checked out these movies, we can't
Yeah.
recommend enough to
Where
catch up.
are you?
um so we got a packed episode coming up for you next week, so please subscribe for that. Dave, just before we wrap up, give me your like top 3 or 4 Tarantino films.
Yes. Yeah. Pulp Fiction 1, Kill
Mm-hmm.
Bill Volume 1, 2, and then Bastards or Reservoir Dogs 3 and 4, subject to change.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll have Django, then Jackie Brown, Kill Bill 2, Hateful Eight, Death Proof. That's the whole list.
Yeah.
Jackie Brown might be too low for some people, but I think overall there are certain tiers that are pretty unimpeachable in
Mm-hmm.
this filmography, and it comes to personal preference for how you sort those tiers out for yourself.
Yeah, I don't have my full list, but obviously Death Proof wouldn't be on it. But Pulp Fiction and then Inglorious Basterds like 1A, 1B for me, I think, and then Django, Kill Bill, and then from there it's I don't know, probably Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown, Hateful Eight. So I agree. I think that there's certainly the cream that's at the top, but the whole body of the dish is worth chewing into. So
Certainly.
definitely do that.